So the third question I received this week is about, what would you say about the ultimate goal of Hizmet movement: education, jihad, politics, charity, human values, or all of them? Thanks. I would say it's a difficult question to ask, because it's very clear in certain time. If you ask this question, what is the aim of the Hizmet movement, it's easy to answer. I would say the aim of Hizmet movement is to represent Islam in the modern world, to represent that they have, like the idea, this is called temsil, to represent representation of a modern Islam. But to represent that, of course, they needed a social cause. How would you represent Islam? You can't just, open certain branches and say, I represent Islam, this is what Islam. So it is about mainly by contributing positively to common problems, to show how Islam can help coping these problems. So those problems were ignorance, poverty, and discrimination that Hizmet defined itself to work around. So they invest on education, dialogue, and charity activities. But what happened is, so this is the main aim. But what critics are fearing, and they should rightly fear so as well, or at least be skeptical, is that in doing so, Hizmet movement achieved a lot of successful outcomes by reaching to 160 plus countries, becoming a global NGO and this and that. But the problem is that, for instance, along that way, of course, as Hizmet grows, the aims and the priorities can easily change if Hizmet people are not careful, and we can observe that it has changed up to a certain degree. Like, for instance, the success become an obsession for many Hizmet people, like as if it matters a lot to be in all the countries around the world, so it's almost like that representation becomes a goal in itself, not necessarily the quality of the service, but the quantity of it matters as well. It was very much influenced by the state, and it created, by doing education, dialogue, and charity activities, it created a lot of influence, which turned into a political capital. Then within Hizmet ranks, we have seen some people wanted to invest and use and abuse this political influence, which created the friction between Erdogan and Hizmet movement eventually. And the influence over decision makers created attention. Many people who were doing Hizmet, or who were among the Hizmet, or who were decision makers in Hizmet, start to see Hizmet as a tool, the organization of Hizmet as a tool to achieve certain aspirations or ambitions, so which create a problem. So what is Hizmet's ultimate goal at this point is not as clear as it used to be, because the movement is in an identity crisis. It will emerge either a very heavily political movement, very reactionary to Erdogan and this and that, or they will reorganize and reform their main motivation, main goals, go back to the drawing board and re-establish themselves around education, dialogue, and charity activities. Or they might even change that and prioritize, let's say, radicalization as a growing global problem, Islamophobia as a growing problem, and decide what the most important thing to do, and reorganize and move on that aspect. So in my opinion, Hizmet, it's hard to say the inclination is in either way, because in one way, all the reasons why Hizmet had to be very, very Turkey-centered, state-centered, transnational movement centered organization, or let me put it again, all the reasons that used to tie Hizmet to Turkey, hence Turkey-related problems and expectations, but being a transnational Turkish movement, essentially having an influence over the state, being an important NGO in Turkey that almost at a point was assumed to be as kingmaker and whatever. So these are not there anymore. The Hizmet's social capital or financial capital or financial resources are not in Turkey anymore. Human capital has been heavily diminished in Turkey, and it seems like next 10 years it will not replace easily. So there is a lot of reason why an observer from outside can see Hizmet can actually steer itself to be a global movement. But of course, you can see the existing management or existing policies are still very much about Turkey. You can see on Twitter accounts that people are still commenting about how successful or unsuccessful the Hizmet movement and its policies and this and that, which shows you that there is a degree of connection with the fate of Turkey, which eventually makes you think that maybe Hizmet won't be able to move away from Turkey or Turkish-centered policies or Turkish-centered ambitions and ultimate goals, which would be very sad. But after all, you know, this I think is the up to Hizmet people and what they do with their own future. Thank you very much. These was the 3 questions that I have received. There is one more question on YouTube that says how Hizmet members should study on language. I think just like anyone else, you know, like however, you know, they can use YouTube or anything. That's not really my professional study. My experience doesn't lie on necessarily advising on how people should learn languages, but language schools might be a good idea. Atembike said, do you think that the work ethics of the movement needs to change and gets more professional in Europe? How this is possible? I won't say professional in the sense of what is perceived by the many people. Professional is people who are paid for the job that they do. It's not necessarily a good thing. I think Hizmet movements should stay at amateur and voluntary basis as much as possible, but act according to the cultural sensitivities of the countries that they are in, and also according to the needs and demands of the countries they are in. How this is possible is a big question to answer. It requires a lot of integration, a lot of research, but it is possible and it should be achieved, and it will be a good example of maybe an Eastern culture meeting with a Western culture and creating some sort of a good outcome from that. Thank you very much. Today I haven't received so much questions, so I don't want to continue any further if there isn't any questions, and hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in like not the next week, the other week, and I'll just share the final end credit, and you'll see the further links to follow these videos. Thank you very much for watching.